It's not about how much we lost, it's about how much we have left. We're the Avengers, we gotta finish this. Here's your look at the Hot Toys Avengers Endgame Mark 85 Iron Man. Tony Stark has faced numerous threats since becoming Iron Man, but all the money in the universe can't bring peace of mind to this billionaire genius after the events of Avengers Infinity War. The invincible Iron Man must now team up with the remaining Avengers to avenge the fallen. Hot Toys proudly presents the Iron Man Mark 85 6-scale collectible figure as the first masterpiece from their lineup inspired by the last exciting installment of the Infinity Saga. Before we get a closer look at Iron Man Mark 85, let's go ahead and get this guy clocked in to see how tall the figure actually stands. Now lately I've been picking up these overseas from a seller right now whose website is currently under construction. As soon as that website's up and running, I'll start providing the links down below in the video descriptions where you guys can get these Hot Toy figures for yourself. Iron Man Mark 85 stands 12.7 inches in height, so we can switch that to centimeters, revealing that the figure stands 32.3 centimeters tall. And of course, if we're going to get some size comparisons going, what a better figure to compare the Mark 85 to than the Mark 50. This was the last Iron Man, well, at least the last Avengers Iron Man figure that we've gotten from Hot Toys, predating the Endgame by one movie. You can see the difference between the two. They're about the same height of figure, although the streamlined design of the Mark 50 doesn't translate over to the Mark 85. The Mark 85 is a little bigger and bulkier, kind of more harking back to his original comic appearance. One of the reasons why I like the 85 so much. But you can definitely see, though, the transition from one to the other. I almost feel in a way that Iron Man, at least Tony Stark, went back to a more bulkier looking costume for the Mark 85, going away from the sleeker design that he had with the Mark 50 here. Going through the figure's accessories, why don't we start first with the display stand that comes included with the Mark 85. Nothing too overly complicated here. You're not getting a bizarre display stand. What you're getting instead is just a straight hexagonal display stand with Avengers Endgame down the bottom, with the arc reactor in the middle. And then, of course, as it overlaps into the A of Avengers, that arc reactor turns yellow. Some would say it's a bit busy. I would say, well, it's just the right amount of busyness. I do like the fact that there's a little bit of extra color added in there, and similar to the color scheme that we're going to be looking at with the 85, you get red and yellow, or red and gold. But you can see there's the Avengers Endgame logo down below there, and then of course we've got Avengers on the front placard. Not so much even a placard, it's just printed on the front of the display stand. One thing I wish that Hot Toys would do with the releases of the Iron Man figures is actually put the mark of the Iron Man along with the name Iron Man. It's fine and good to put Iron Man, at least you know who the display stand belongs to, but go that extra little mile, add a mark number on there as well. So of course when you're looking at these figures and they're all on your display shelf, you can instantly look at them and identify them right away by the mark number that follows this particular model. That being said, he does come with an adjustable neck. Nothing really overly different here. As you can see, it's just an adjustable neck that you can bend and manipulate this depending on which position and which pose you'd like to get your Iron Man in. And of course, you've got your traditional waist clip. Nothing is really different here. Nothing new brought to the table. Again, they probably could have made a little more of an elaborate display stand, but keeping in mind, this is just the regular release 85. This is not the deluxe version. I don't know if the deluxe version is actually going to get a much more elaborate display stand than just the one that we're having a look at right here. But for the purpose it serves, I'm content and happy with the display stand we get, short of the fact, again, I wish that they would add a mark number on the front right next to Iron Man's name. So thinking what I might do for the rest of Iron Man's accessories is we'll go one at a time, up close and personal on each of the individual accessories, then we'll go back to the figure, kind of go through a full rundown of what the figure looks like, his features and his details. And then we'll go back to those accessories we looked at the beginning of this review, and I'll show you guys how that then swaps out onto the figure itself. With that being said, let's get a closer look at the largest of the things that come included with the Mark 85, and that's his Nano Lightning Refocuser, a big giant construct that goes onto the back of Tony Stark's torso, literally just by these 3 pegs right here. All you really have to do is remove the battery plates, pop it off, put this back on in its place. I know right now it doesn't make much sense, but I'll show you guys how that works in a second. This is all done in plastic. I really don't feel like necessarily it needed to be die cast. 2 problems that go along with it being die cast, one of which being obviously if this is metal and you're putting this on the back of a metal figure, it's going to cause some stability issues. You may have a figure that's not the easiest to stand upright. The other one, and of course the one most affecting your wallet, is anything above and beyond the figure that's die cast will of course increase the cost of the figure. And I feel like in a case like this, accessories or Iron Man's constructs don't necessarily need to be die cast. Keep them plastic. I will say though, one thing of keeping this plastic is these are more susceptible to breaking. So if you do put this on Iron Man's torso, just make sure the figure's stable enough and don't put them on a high shelf, because I feel like definitely if these were to fall and hit the ground or bang into something, these could crack or potentially just break right off. That being said, get a closer look at the details on the front of it. I really like the metallic silver that they've used to the front middle section here. And I don't know if you can actually see that or not, but they've added this nice chrome, these individual rings of chrome on the inside of that. That looks really nice. Of course, it's all branched out. It looks like a big starfish, really. It's got some really dark, rich colors, the metallic gold, the metallic silver, and of course the primary color, this metallic cranberry red, which of course will go back to that color frequently as we're having a look at all the rest of the things and the Iron Man Mark 85 himself. Put that to the side. The other thing he comes included with, and again, a very talked about issue, he comes included with his Nano Gauntlet. Now, we are also going to be getting a deluxe damaged version Mark 85, which will also give us, I believe, a Nano Gauntlet. The difference between the two will be more so in the head portrait. The body will be much more damaged. I believe we also are going to be getting a damaged version of the Nano Gauntlet. Some would say, why would you then include this with the standard release Iron Man? I still feel like if you are displaying your figure in a snap pose, keeping in mind, he could still snap and his armors looked relatively undamaged. Well, a little bit, of course. So I feel like he could still definitely make use of a Nano Gauntlet here, even though I'm likely probably going to be displaying this just as a traditional Iron Man. And then when that damaged version comes out is where then I'll bring in the damaged portrait of Tony Stark, as well as the damaged version of the Nano Gauntlet. Just in case you're curious though, normally on these arms of these Iron Mans, of course, he can project his repulsor blast in his hands. The same thing applies here for the Nano Gauntlet. Light will still run its way through and will illuminate not only the repulsor blast, but also illuminate this as well. In case you are curious as well, you can get somewhat a snap pose. Depending on how you snap your fingers. You can kind of bring them in so it kind of looks like Tony Stark is snapping his finger, but not really well. The thumb does a fine enough job, but unfortunately the middle finger just doesn't deliver it. It doesn't look like, well, it is on what seems to be a slight ball joint. I think it's more just a hinge joint, and I really don't want to force it. Like I said, you can get pretty close, but not quite a full snap. And again, I'll show you guys how that goes on the figure in a second. Comes with various different hands. Right now he's just got closed fists in his hands. Not the most interesting thing to be putting in the sockets of his forearms, but he also comes with a bunch of other things as well. Say for example, I'm just going to put those hands to the side for right now. Say for example, you do want to give him that repulsor blast gesture. He does have these slightly arched hands, which as you can see when you're looking at the hand, it definitely has a more angled look to it. There's no articulation in the fingers. In fact, these are all just very rubbery, soft hands, but they do still illuminate that repulsor blast. He comes with a pair of those. And like most Iron Man figures come with, he also comes with a pair of just regular hands that do have the articulation points also in the knuckles and of the individual fingers. You can see there's the hinge joints right there, and also in the thumb as well. So that's always a nice touch. Likelihood, I usually display my Iron Man figures with the posable fingers. Just saves me a lot of headache later on, changing the hands out later to something else. I find it's just a lot easier just to keep the posable fingers in place. And if I decide I want to put them in a fist, well, then I can go back to those hands, for example. And I bring those fingers in. Just like that, just like that, just like that, and just like that. And you can get a somewhat, not quite full fist, but at least you get a little bit more. You get a little bit more options available, I feel, when it comes to the posable articulated fingers. So that's usually the hands of choice that when it comes to displaying Iron Mans for myself, this is the route I usually end up going with. Alright, so we can go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to the release of the Mark 85. One of the things that had a lot of collectors really fuming was the idea that we were getting an alternate Tony Stark portrait that looked like this. Now, in hand, I will say, when I saw the images surface online of what the 85 alternate head portrait was going to look like, I really didn't like the design of Tony Stark's head at all. And yet, in hand, I find it's not bad. Does it need work? Yes, I will say it needs work, but I don't think it's as bad as we thought it was going to be when we first saw those images surface online. Keeping in mind as well, when it comes to the beginning of Endgame, Tony has been stranded in space, so he's lost a lot of weight. There's a little bit of a malnourished look on his face, for example. The fact that his cheeks are slightly more sunken in, that his wrinkles underneath his eyes are a little bit more profound. But where I feel like it's a pretty good head sculpt, I'm going to move this one over. I want to bring in the Mark 50 head sculpt that we got for Tony. It's not until you really bring it and start comparing it with other Tony Stark head sculpts that you really don't mind this one at all. At least I don't. I don't mind this at all. I mean, when I see it from certain angles, I will admit, it's a better looking likeness of Robert Downey Jr. There's something still off on it when you're looking at it dead straight on. And again, it may just be the fact that I'm so used to not seeing Tony with such sunken in cheeks that you can see he looks quite sick. But again, when you see it from the side, or you see it from like an angle, I think it's a better looking portrait in all honesty. Prior to this review, we also had a look at a couple of third-party Tony Stark head portraits. I just want to bring those guys in so you guys can see the difference between the two. Now, of course, I will stress that this is not official Hot Toys head sculpt. This was a third-party head sculpt that we looked at before. But again, the more I compare this one to other Tony's heads, even like this one that isn't really official, do I feel like this is a really good head sculpt? Does it need work? Yes. I still think there's something not quite jiving about this. It could be the coloring of his hair. It could be the fact that his face and skin tone seems like it's a little on the dirty side, like he's got a really grungy skin tone going for him. But again, when you compare it even to an official Hot Toys Tony Stark portrait, the more I see this, the more I think this one is less looking like Tony Stark. And at the time that we had a look at the Mark 50, I thought this was a great looking Tony Stark head sculpt. Until again, I bring this one right in. I've seen customizers design a far superior looking Tony portrait than the ones that we've gotten from Hot Toys. But I think for, again, the purpose of displaying the figure, I'm probably not going to be displaying this particular Tony, this particular Iron Man, with this head sculpt. This one is going to be kept just to a straight Iron Man look. I think when it comes down to the battle-damaged version of Tony Stark, or battle-damaged version of the 85, then, of course, I'm probably going to decide to use a Tony portrait instead. The other thing we did get, at least I did get, was a third-party battle-damaged Tony Stark head sculpt. In case you are curious, you can use these heads with the body, and I'll show you guys how that works in a second. But again, when you show them side to side, the problems that, again, I thought I may have had with this particular head sculpt almost seem to go away completely, or mostly go away, because I will admit there's still something that's not quite jiving about this head sculpt. Again, it could be the hair, could be the part that they've given on the hair, I don't know. There's something not quite resonating for me, but I definitely don't think it's as bad as people were thinking it was going to be. Now let's talk about Iron Man's lights, and the fact that he has a lot of them. If you've collected Hot Toys Iron Mans in the past, you sort of know by now that when you get a new released Hot Toys Iron Man, there's going to be a lot of time and preparation involved removing the panels from the places in his body, installing the very tiny, easy to lose button cell batteries, and then having to remove all those panels again to access the light on and off switches. With that being said, I was successful 75% of installing the batteries onto Iron Man here, except for two. And I'll be completely transparent about this. I had real difficulty installing the batteries into his legs. I'll talk about that in a second. But first, before we do that, let's pick up the figure. I want to show you guys the head sculpt here. And I want to also show you guys how the light up option works. Now, it's very much a traditional looking Iron Man suit head. When we compare it, say, for example, let's pick up the Mark 50 and show you guys what it looks like on the side. I think if you compare the two side to side, I feel at least we get a much more traditional looking Iron Man design. Very much a hark back to the original 80s comics where Iron Man would have had a gold and red suit. Of course, he changed his suit many times in the comics as well. But this is kind of what I consider to be a true comic tie-in suit, with the gold in the arms, the red in the lower forearms, gold faceplate, and of course, gold legs. I want to talk a little bit about his head sculpt for a second. For that, I'm going to just pop the head off and put that to the side. doing a little bit of carnage here. I want to show you guys a closer look at the head sculpt. All of the elements of this figure have what you could consider like these little scuff and damaged marks. You could debate the fact that, of course, if his suit is made of nanos that are always shifting and repairing themselves, why would he have then battle-damaged places on his suit? I feel like maybe only if the nanos were damaged to the point where they had to fully repair themselves, it is possible that they could get scuffed just with a little bit of that on the side. It's debatable, of course. You could just say Tony Stark shouldn't have a suit if it's made of nanos that have any little bit of battle damage. But that's what we're basically getting here with the Iron Man from Hot Toys. You get all these little areas here. It's not even just on his head. It's everywhere on his suit. You may not like it. I don't mind it personally because I think it just adds a little bit of extra personality to the figure. Now there's a battery compartment here. You're just going to lift this part up. And inside, I've already taken the liberty of installing, like I said, majority of all the batteries. There was the problem with the legs that I'll talk about in a second. You can see there's the battery compartment right there. You unscrew that, flick this on, and there you have Iron Man's eyes. Go ahead and replace the head sculpt right here. By the way, this is magnetized. It seems to be always the case when it comes to these Iron Man heads. The top part that covers off the rest of his dome generally are always magnetized. You can see it projects a pretty soft looking LED light. I don't tend to like running these for long periods of time. While I feel like we get decent batteries included with these releases, I find after a short period of time, these eyes, or really the rest of his body, start to dim fast. So that's what the head sculpt looks like. Go ahead and put that back onto his body. Just like that. And we'll go ahead and flip the figure around. Now let's talk about the torso piece here. Now you do get a couple of tools available. You get tweezers and you also get this little lifting tool. What you will want to do is right at the very top here, there's a little lip. See, there's a little opening right there, kind of looks like a mouth. In fact, actually, when you see this, kind of looks like those are the eyes, kind of a chin area, and that's his mouth. That's all I'm sure you're going to be seeing right now. But all you're going to do is you're going to take the end of the lifting tool, you just get it underneath this, and you just flick this off. What you don't want to do is flick it off so it lands onto the floor, so I'll have to go and retrieve that. You can see there's the battery compartment right there with an on and off switch. Flick that right on. It lights the back lights ×4. You flip it around to the front. It illuminates these aspects of the torso. And of course it illuminates the arc reactor as well. Next, let's go ahead and tackle Iron Man's arms. Right here, you'll see there's a little lip. Hopefully you can see it right underneath there. What you need to do is you need to remove the tricep plate. I find it also helps a little bit to bend the elbow. What you will have to do is just get your lifting tool underneath that and just pop that up like that. Couldn't be any bit easier, really. I wish really the legs were as easy as that. And then from there, you're just going to go in there. And again, I've added the batteries here, 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 and, well, we'll talk about the legs. Switch this on. And then from there, of course, you've got the repulsor blast. Fully illuminated. You're going to have to do the exact same thing on the other side. Before you do that, of course, make sure you go back and replace that plate. And all you really have to do is just line it up, lift it, put it underneath the shoulder pad, and then just snap it into place. And then it's not going to be going anywhere. I suppose, well, actually, while we're here, we can talk a little bit about the fact that they've got all these little scuff marks. Things that I was talking about before when it came to his faceplate. You see it also here on the side of his arm as well. But let's go ahead and spin the arm around, and we'll do the exact same thing on this other side. Just lift it back. Again, the lip is right under there. So again, we'll just get the lifting tool, get it right under the sweet spot here. It's a little harder, mind you, to do this with camera on, but again, we'll pop that off. Go have to retrieve that in a second, and then we'll go ahead and switch this on to illuminate, of course, the other repulsor blast. And there's his hands right there. To install the batteries in Iron Man's legs was the hardest of all the things I had to put on this figure, and eventually I honestly just gave up on it. Let me show you the instruction guide that came included with this, which I would always recommend if you are picking this piece up for yourself or any of these Hot Toy figures. The price that these things go for, thoroughly go through the instruction guide first to get a good idea of the allowances that you can move these figures in, and especially when it comes to installing the batteries. So when we look at, for example, the legs on Iron Man, located down at the bottom corner here, we cross-reference that to the legs actually that are on the figure. And it's this piece right here. It's this section right here. Goes underneath. And the idea is you're supposed to be able to lift this. Now, I spent a good amount of time trying to peel that away. I used the lifting tool. I tried to go in there just with my fingers and lift that panel. You can see how it wants to free itself. And yet, every single time I did this, I felt like there was too much stress being applied to it, where I found like that plastic plating was going to break. Well, that's the last thing I certainly wanted to happen. Now, when I'm really looking at the figure, though, and I'm trying to gauge what would actually light up on the figure, the only thing I can really see is these side lights right here. This one here, and this one right here. I don't believe there is any other lights that do light up on this, as everything else that looks like could be lights are actually just the painted silver instead. If it's only just the thing that I'm going to be losing here is the light here and the light here, then I'm fine for the idea of just not installing the batteries there in the first place. Where I really do want the lights is the arc reactor, the lights on the side, and most definitely the lights illuminating right now from his eyes. That I think I probably would just do away completely with the idea of removing this plate. Again, you could probably have had better success than me, but I mean, even trying to pry it, it's telling me, leave it alone. Leave it alone. And I think I'm just going to do that. I think I'm going to leave that alone. And again, if it's only really those lights, I don't feel like that's impacting the figure. So unfortunately, I can't remove this and show you guys the battery compartment. The real sucky part in all of this is that keeping in mind every single time you want to light this guy up, you're going to have to do all the steps that I showed you. Remove the top dome, for example, to activate the light. Remove the back panel to switch on the light. Remove the tricep plates to switch on those switches to illuminate the repulsor blast, and then go in there and do your best to remove this plate piece to access what again only seems to be the lights on the top. It's a really involved process. I really wish there was a simpler way to go about doing this, whether they just simply used magnets. I feel like maybe for the tricep pieces, those are easy to get to. This is an easy piece to remove, as well as, of course, the head. I feel like things that are larger, where you have to be prying from the top, and so much of it is just long plastic that could snap. I really feel like these things right here should be added with magnets, not pegs. Magnets would have been a lot easier. I could just pop that right off, similar to what I did with the dome of his helmet. Switch the light on, snap that back into place. But that's not the case. Again, they rely on you having to force that beyond the point of what I feel to be is a real safe, comfortable method. And again, trying to remove that, I just told myself, I really don't want to risk it. So let's get a closer look at the Iron Man Mark 85. And again, apologies I should really make for the fact I couldn't get the lights to illuminate in his legs, but you can probably see by the circumstance of what was presented in front of me, that plastic didn't want to give on either one of his legs. And the last thing I would certainly want to do is break that plastic plating just to access what I thought was only two lights to start off with. Let's get a closer look at the head sculpt here. I know we sort of started talking about it at the beginning of this review. I'm really happy with the way that this head sculpt looks. Traditional looking Iron Man pulled from the pages of his earlier comics. And I really feel like if you're going to give Tony Stark that last hurrah, I'm glad that they went with a slightly more bulkier suit than the one that he had with the Mark 50. This is more traditional looking Iron Man suit. And the colors that they use for both the gold in his shoulders and biceps, the gold, of course, in the faceplate, and the much appreciated gold that they put actually in his legs as well, really translates to a nice looking suit. It's not as sleek, I would say, as the Mark 50, but I like the design of it where it's just a slight bit bulkier, and it works really well. Now, again, going back to the idea that he's got these scuff marks, anybody following the science of nanos and the fact that these things could heal themselves would really then debate the fact that he should have all these little markings on his suit. It's just a matter of preference more than anything else. I prefer the fact that he does have the little scuff marks because I feel it adds a little bit of extra personality to the costume. You see he's got like a couple of those little notches, those little scratches on places of his armor, like here on the sides of his torso. Especially you see a lot of it here when it comes to his shoulders and his biceps. But he's got a lot of good coloring going for him. You can see the lights illuminating on the back of the figure. Normally I wouldn't tend to keep the lights running while I'm going through the full extensive end of this figure review because I'm really worried that the lights are going to start dimming out on me. Well, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll actually hopefully still keep those lights still going by the end of all of this. But we'll tilt the head up just so you guys can see the detailed work done to the neck. He actually has quite a good range of motion. I know we're not really even talking about his posability just yet, but he has quite a bit when it comes to his head. Really want to commend them for the fact that they gave him a really superposable looking neck. As for the rest of his body, again, it's made up of more panels not quite what we would see with the Mark 50. Again, this is a more traditional looking Iron Man suit. So if I feel like when I'm looking at this, there's more plates visible than what we got with the Mark 50. Even things like on the figure itself, when you're looking at it, he has these little side not movable or removable, but they're just slightly lifting plates on either side of his torso. Not even sure if you can actually see it, but they've gone in there and detailed some of the inner workings just underneath those panels. That's a nice little touch. This also flips up as well, which a lot of it has more to do with the articulation on this figure, because you can actually dislodge his abdomen and giving him just a little bit of additional posability. We'll talk about that more so in a second. Again, when you look a little bit further down on the figure, I personally like the incorporating of the gold as much as what we get here with the Mark 85. A lot of additional gold goes a long way for me. So much in the previous films, gold was really more just as an accent color to the figure or to the design of the costume. Most of the Mark suits were generally all red, with just only few little sliver accents of silver and the gold color, but you get a lot more of that going on for the bicep, like I said, the shoulder, and all in this leg area here. I mean, check out the detailing that they incorporated into this. How that silver branches its way out and spreads across the gold is all a nice touch. Again, you've got that little scuffing color that they've added to the back of the legs, for example. Just really disappointed that I couldn't get in there to remove the plates. Again, I really don't want to fight that. As we get a little bit further down, I like the detailing done to the knee where it looks like it's made of separate panels. You can imagine that in the real world application of this suit, those panels would shift along with the joints of Tony Stark's body underneath that. And then, of course, we get down to his legs. Very traditional looking Iron Man feet and Iron Man boots, I suppose. A nice little touch of also detail that they added is these little lifted struts that go on the backs of his legs. These can actually lift up, and they're separately hinged from the rest of his feet or the rest of his legs. And that has nice touches as well. Again, you got these nice little scratches added in there. I know, some people may not like the design of that, but I think that works really well on this particular armor. It just, again, adds a little bit of wear and tear to the suit, even though in the movie it may not be the most practical. So now we're going to go back to those accessories that we were looking at the beginning of this review, because we're going to do a little bit of part swapping here on the Mark 85. The first thing we want to tackle is swapping out the helmeted portrait with the Tony Stark head sculpt instead. For that, I've already taken the liberty of turning off the lights because I just don't want to drain those batteries the whole time doing that. I've actually taken the time and turned off the lights on everything just because I don't want to drain those batteries. But let's go ahead and remove the head. The head, the neck, and what you may not see is a collar piece all have to be removed in swapping out this head sculpt with the Tony Stark one instead. To do that, I find it's easy not to grab it from the head, but actually grab it from the neck piece and just pop that off. The collar piece tends to stay behind, and that's fine. You can remove that as a separate piece. One thing I find is it's very easy to remove the neck, and it may have something to do with the fact that they use a very large socket joint on the bottom of base of the neck. So once that's done, we can move that to the side. We will have to then go in here and remove this collar piece in favor of this one right here. The collar is a lot longer and stretches further up Tony's neck. And that makes some sense. If the helmet is going to disappear, he's still going to have that neck appliance still visible. To do this now, we're going to go ahead and just lift this back piece. And it's generally actually not too much of an issue. I don't know why now. There we go. Just remove it from either side. It's slightly softer plastic. You just put that to the side, and you replace it then with this one right here. I will tell you, if you try using the Tony Stark portrait, that looks a little strange without having a head. If you try using this original neck piece, the Tony Stark head just doesn't seem to fit properly in there. Then we can go and grab the Tony portrait, put that down into the socket joint, and for that you may have to apply a little bit of pressure, there we go, to get the Tony Stark head in place. I think one of the reasons why some people had problems with the portrait of Tony, and I feel that more so now when I get this head sculpt in place. I will admit I probably could still push that neck just a little bit further down, but I'll do that in a second, is I do find like the neck looks off when you're looking at it from the rest of the body. Maybe that may change when we have a look at the deluxe version, but I find for the standard release, maybe the jarring aspect of it is not the head on its own, but when you start putting the head into the socket of the rest of his body. I mean, it still looks good, but I can definitely see there's something slightly off on the neck and the head, and I just can't put my finger on what exactly is bothering me about this head sculpt. It's almost there, and yet it's just off ever so slightly. With that being said, I also want to show you guys the back torso here. And again, we're going to grab the lifting tool. going to go ahead and remove this. There we go. And remember, of course, this piece that we had a look at before, this basically just clips in the 3 peg points right there, line up then with the 3 peg holes on the back of his torso. And all you really have to do is line those up, get them all situated and properly lined up, and then you'll just apply just a little bit of pressure to get that to snap into place. Now, I understand that this is probably not going to be the way that you're going to display Iron Man. I'm just only going through now all of those individual accessories and snapping them into place. Admittingly, I think when I display this Iron Man with this Tony portrait, and of course the Nano glove, I'm probably, of course, not going to be displaying him with this large construct on the back of his torso. I simply just did that now, here in the now, so you guys can see how it works and how it snaps into place. So now the last thing we need to install is the Nano Gauntlet. To do that, this may be somewhat squeamish for some of you. You're going to grab the bicep here for Tony's arm, and you're literally just going to yank it. But when you're yanking it, pull it from this part of the forearm, as you're literally just removing it, like so. It's a little unruly, unfortunately, the idea that you're going to be pulling an arm off such an expensive figure, but the idea is you're only removing this aspect of it, and then you're going to be replacing it with the gauntlet. And then from that, you're just going to snap that back into place, and you can see the light still works. The light doesn't work as well when it comes to the individual stones. It still lights it well enough that I suppose in low lit areas, yes, you could probably still be able to see those stones brightly shone. With lights, of course, shining in this, especially studio lights, you're probably not going to see it as much here on the gauntlets. But I appreciate the fact the way that they've made this, all those stones are translucent plastic. So not only does the light then shine through the repulsor blast, but it does a pretty decent job, I'll say decent job, of shining those individual stones as well. 2 last things I want to talk about before we get down to the articulation on the figure is that he does have a removable chest plate. The chest plate isn't as difficult as you would think to be removed. It's certainly not as difficult as it is to remove the leg plates. All you have to do is just kind of get your finger on the top there. You can use the lifting tool also if you want to. And you can remove this completely to expose some really interesting looking detailing that they incorporated to the bottom. Practical, yes, to the movie, no, because again, if this is all self-generating armor, it really wouldn't make sense. Then he does have a removable chest plate. But I do appreciate the fact that they've taken the time and put that in there. When you are putting it back in place, there's these 2 peg holes on the top, and you'll see just on the back and the inside of the plate, there's 2 pegs. Just line them up to the holes and snap them into place. The other thing he comes included with, if we spin this figure around, is he comes with a couple of air flaps. And they're kind of hard to pinpoint where they are. If you look at the shoulder area here, just lift right where the shoulder, this plate here, starts lining up to all the little gears and stuff on the inside of the suit. And you can just lift them up right there. Again, the only downside when you are lifting them is sometimes these pegs do free themselves, but at least they're just pegs. All you have to do is just push them back in and then try your luck again to lift those up. It's just a little bit of something. It's just a little bit of something. But appreciate the fact that Hot Toys would actually take the time and put something in there in the suit in the first place. Let's run through the posability now in the Mark 85. For this, and in final looks, I've just decided to keep the Tony Stark portrait in place for the time being. If you did have the original defaulted head sculpt with the helmet and the neck, that would be 2 separate pieces. Because we are using this Tony Stark head, it means that his head is attached to his neck. It's all one mold. So really the only thing that you then sacrifice is that you don't have the independent articulation on the head. It's all basically going the same way. It's all attached to the neck. Because of that, you do have the ball joint. It can rotate the head all the way around, up, down, left, and right. And again, if you use the helmeted portrait, you basically would have all the same stuff I just mentioned, but you would also have the benefit of having the head as a separate piece. You can move that back and forth as well. As for the shoulders do rotate naturally on their own, out, forward and back. But also in the instructions, you can also pull the arms out. You can tell how disinterested I am by the idea of that. It just gives you a little bit of extra clearance by, say, 1/4 of an inch. But it just gives you just the right amount that it gives you some extra clearance when it comes to moving those arms. I personally don't like the idea of yanking arms out. Even if you're only just pulling out by just a little bit, the idea of pulling something out like this and running the risk of breaking a ball joint on the inside, I really don't like doing that. When you're finished though, just push the arm back in, push the arm back in, and again, you have just the natural motion without that option. One thing I do like and appreciate is that when you are moving the arms out, for example, you can see how the shoulders are hinged, and they're hinged by what seems to be a spring. So when you are moving the arms out, naturally the shoulders will shift along with that. And that's a very simple, effective way of giving you that additional articulation and not limiting it by having that extra shoulder piece situated on the top of his arm. As for his arm itself, he does have a swivel at the top there, basically where it's attached to the socket of the shoulder. He has a double hinge on the elbow. Not the most realistic, no, because you're going to be seeing on the silver on the inside panels of his armor. Obviously in the film, because it's seamless armor, you really shouldn't be able then to see that, but he does have it. And the hands rotate all the way around. I'm still keeping, for the time being, the Nano Gauntlet. But if you have the normal arms, they would basically work the exact same way. Same hinges and the same articulation point on the hands. Now, on these specific hands, as we've already talked about before, if you are using either these hands or using the articulated finger hands, then both of them will have the individual articulation points, 1 and 2, on each of the fingers. And the same thing also for the thumb, where you can bring those in. And again, you can kind of pull off the snap. So those are his arms. Let's go ahead and start tackling his torso. So his torso already has a ball joint. It's a little on the more limited side, but what you can also do too is pull and extend out the coils almost like a snake. And that then gives Tony some additional posability, not only in the top torso, but in his lower abdomen as well. And you can also lift these up just a little bit to give you a little bit of extra clearance. And it rotates all the way around like that. So that's a nice touch. Not the first time we've seen that. A lot of the Mark suits have all kind of had an accordioning torso like this, but I do appreciate the fact that they actually would put that in there. Now let's talk about his legs. His legs split out only to about there. You can, like the arms, bring the legs out. I don't like doing this because I always feel like I'm at that point where I'm going to rip those legs right off. The same way I really don't like yanking those arms out, just because I worry that that could be the thing that breaks this figure. But the whole idea is that the legs do kind of trackball their way down, and that gives you a little bit of additional articulation on the legs. One thing I do also like is the lower skirting of his armor lifts up to go along with that. These lift up right here. Funny enough, I've actually cut myself just on this little point right here. It's not super sharp, but it's sharp enough that if you run your finger across it quickly, it does actually leave a scratch. So you want to be a little careful with that. His legs also swivel at the top, cut of the thigh, basically where that's attached right there. You can see right there. He does have a double hinge on the knee. A nice, strong, ratcheted joint. You can hear it, or maybe you can hear it. Nice ratcheted joint when you are moving that leg back and forth. And then when it comes to his feet, let's talk a little bit about his feet for a second. His feet move forward and back, but he does also have this back. We already looked at this before. The back little heel area, and this lifts up as well. So you get some afforded articulation by the fact you're able to move those out. And then when you're done, just fold that back in and fold that back in. It's a really good looking figure, admittingly. I really am happy that I got this one. Some people, I'm sure, may have passed completely on getting the standard release of this Mark 85 in favor of getting the deluxe version, the deluxe damaged version, because I'm sure many people are probably going to be displaying the Mark 85 in that final snap sequence. Tony Stark with that one scenario, the winnable scenario. For me, I'm probably still going to be interested in picking up the deluxe damaged version, and I'll probably be displaying that one with the Tony Stark portrait. Instead, for this one, I'm probably going to go and revert back to the original helmet and display this one as simply just a regular Iron Man suit. Because I think it's a nice looking suit. It's classic in its design. It brings in a lot of much needed gold, which we really didn't see enough in the movies. Yes, the plates in his thighs or the biceps in his arms, for example, had gold, but here's where we kind of get full sleeves of gold and full leggings of gold. And I think it really works well on this figure. Whether you decide to display this one with the very disappointed by many head sculpt of Tony Stark, or you decide instead to display it with the helmeted head sculpt, either way, I think it's a really great looking figure to be putting on display. The Avengers Endgame Iron Man Mark 85, at least this standard release version that we had a look at in this review, may be a bit of a tougher sell for collectors that want to get an 85 for their collection, but maybe just due to funds and spacing available, they don't want to get both versions. I can understand why people are going to be waiting to get the damaged version instead, Because after all, if you're going to be immortalizing Tony Stark in his final moments in the Marvel films, then yeah, the deluxe damaged version makes a little bit more sense. The scarring in his face and the damaged Infinity Nano Gauntlet, I should say, in his arm. I can understand why people may pass on this one completely and instead wait to get the damaged version. But I feel like the merits in this one isn't so much what I'm doing here in final looks, because this is the way I'm going to display that damaged version when eventually he gets released. No, instead, I'm going to go back to basics and display this figure with just the regular Iron Man helmet, because on its own, it's a great looking Iron Man suit. I appreciate the fact that if we're going to get the final suit in the movie, we're going to go back to the comics and get the more traditional Invincible Iron Man looking armor that he has, with the gold in his sleeves, the gold in his legs, a little bit more gold than what we're used to seeing in an Iron Man suit. So while, yes, I still will be interested in getting the damaged version of Tony Stark in his final moments, I'm still happy to have picked up this version, because I'm not going to be displaying it how you're seeing right now. I'm going to be displaying it as just a regular Iron Man suit. Now, of course, the big topic of interest for this particular release was the head sculpt of Tony Stark. Some people, most people, thought it was a pretty bad looking head sculpt. And I think even Hot Toys decided to go back to basics and fix some of the problems that they had with this head sculpt to give us the one that we're getting right here. I will admit, there is something definitely wrong about the head sculpt. I don't know if it's just the coloring of his hair. I didn't mention it too much in this review, but the hair color does bother me a little bit. I'm not really sure what color they were supposed to go with, but it's got this weird sheen to it. But I will admit, like the head sculpt, there is something that's not quite right about it. It could be just the fact that he's got a little bit more of a narrower face, simply just because, of course, he's been stranded in space for so long. But I will say, it looks better in hand than it did online. And hopefully this review has helped to show that. It's not until, actually, that I compare it with other Iron Man Tony Stark heads, until I realized that this one is a lot better than I thought it would be. I didn't think I'd like it, and I still think there's something off on this head sculpt, but I don't think it's as bad as I thought it would be when I first ordered this one online. Again, I'm not going to be displaying this Iron Man looking like he is right now. I'm simply just doing this for final looks. I am still very anxious and excited to get that damaged version so I can immortalize Tony Stark the way he was at the very end of Avengers Endgame. But let me know down below in the comments section whether you're going to plan on ordering the Iron Man, this version of Iron Man, and the damaged version, or if you're simply just going to save and get the damaged version instead. Also, as your video question for today is, what's your favorite Iron Man suit from the movies? Let me know down below in the comments section. If you're also new to this channel and you're liking all the content you're seeing, consider the idea of hitting that subscribe button down below. You can move on over to the bell notification and hit that as a friendly reminder to YouTube that yes, in fact, you want to get those notifications on every new video that pops up on this channel. But just know as well, Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when you'll find new videos popping up. And speaking a little bit about Hot Toys, there's going to be definitely a lot more Hot Toys reviews lined up and coming your way. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.